I don't think that the psychedelic drugs are drugs at all in the sense they don't cure any physical illness. They're not drugs like heroin, they're not drugs even like alcohol. They're instruments which expand consciousness, they speed up the mind. Chemicals are the keys which open up and speed up, expand the mind.
Greetings, everybody. Turn on, tune in, and drop out with me, Adrian Smith, and my co-host, Rod Barnett, as we dive back into the acid-soaked world of the 1960s. Welcome back, Rod. How are you?
I am doing well. Looking forward to talking about this very odd film.
It is odd. Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah. So, what's happening with you? I know you've released at least 10 other podcast episodes since our last one.
No, actually, I have not. I've released one. I've released Strangler of the Swamp.
Yes.
Which I did for the Bloody Pit with author David Annandale. He and I seem to have found a niche where every now and then we're going to talk about a Poverty Row horror film produced in the 1940s. And this time out, Strangler of the Swamp got both of our interests for a rewatch back in October. And so we spent about 90 minutes talking about a 58-minute long film.
So it's almost enough time to watch the film twice.
Almost.
Whilst listening, yeah. It's funny how that is often the way. And I don't think I've got much I can talk about that I've been up to since our last episode.
You and I do have a couple of things on the boil, but I don't know that there's been no forward motion yet. So
no. I think one thing I could mention that's connected to the podcast is Eugenio Ercoloni teased on Facebook the other day that there is a 4K disc coming of Criminal. So I know a while ago I found out that a label was putting out a double bill of the Criminal films, but here in the UK I believe a label is also planning to do just Criminal on its own as a UHD Blu-ray, which seems crazy to me, but there you go. Yeah, what a world we live in. But I mean, there's always just loads of cool stuff being announced all the time. Severin are prepping the world for their Black Friday, and their Black Friday so far, their releases seem to be mainly Italian cannibal films.
Yeah, Eaten Alive, and
yeah, and also another one of the post-apocalypse films that we didn't talk about, which is, what's it called, Rats, Night of Terror?
Yes, but you and I may not have talked about it, but I have.
Yes.
I have a severe fondness for that addle-brained film.
And as it is increasingly the way, these are all getting UHD releases as well, which will please some people and annoy other people in equal measure.
True.
And so Eaten Alive, which is great. I really like that one. Slave of the Cannibal God. Ursula Andress. Those are a couple. And they also just, I think, yesterday maybe or the day before, they announced Hell of the Living Dead.
Yes.
Which I think you've also covered on the Bloody Pit.
Yes, indeed. I was dragged kicking and screaming into a conversation with two of them, or was it three of them? I've forgotten. There were too many of us talking about that film, and I was the one pointing out that it is not very good.
And I just don't know how UHD is going to help a film like
that. It's just not going to help it at all.
Unless you're studying special effects makeup and you want to watch a version of the film where you can really see the makeup really well, then I guess it might be useful. But
well, I will say that there's some rather fascinating nudity in that film, and perhaps
right.
the increased resolution would help people study that. I myself, in Hell of the Living Dead, am just happy that at long last there are the possibility of razor sharp freeze frames of my favorite Spanish character actor, Victor Israel. So
there you are. Well, there's something for everybody.
yeah. Yes, maybe I shouldn't have paired those two concepts in the same breath, so that people understand that I'm
You've probably just sold at least another 5 copies there, I reckon. So, well done.
Oh my! That was far from my intent, people. I swear.
It does seem to be a bit of a cannibalism themed Black Friday, which is quite fun because they're also doing Delicatessen, which
is a great film.
I really, really love that film.
Mm-hmm.
So still a few more films to be announced, I think. As always, I'm a little bit jealous or sad that we're not involved in, providing extras for any of these kind of cult Italian movies. But
can't do them all.
Yeah, we have enough stuff going on. Which brings us back to current psychedelic mini-season. So last time we talked about a film with a number of titles. The main title was just LSD, and also known as LSD Hell for $5.
Mm-hmm.
And this film this week is called Acid. It was from 1968, directed by Giuseppe Maria Scotese, and it is called Acid, Delirium of the Senses. Cue some freaky music. Here goes. And this one is kind of a Mondo semi-documentary.
Yeah, it's kind of when we were talking about doing this one, I was under the impression that it was more on the side of being a documentary, and it starts off that way, but it quickly becomes just kind of a film.
Yeah, it is. It's like a portmanteau.
Yeah, that's not a bad way of looking at it, yeah.
Yeah. Shot in New York, primarily, although I suspect there is some Italian studio stuff in there.
I do too.
And purporting to be a kind of... Well, at the beginning it seems like a kind of open-minded exploration of the hippie movement in New York especially, and the effects of LSD. So the film was being shot around the time when LSD was when that whole movement was in full swing, but also around the time it was just being made illegal.
Right.
So it's quite interesting kind of topic for them to take on. I did a little bit of... I tried to find some reviews or anything, and I haven't been able to find any contemporary reviews, but I did find a couple of articles in Variety about the film, and one of them was about the making of the film, which I just thought I'd sort of mention at the beginning as we are getting started. And it said that this article is from March of 1968.
Okay.
67, I beg your pardon, March 67, so the year before the film came out. And it says, first attempt by European filmmaker to employ the background of America's psychedelic haunts has entered production at Incom Studios, also known as Deer Studios, which that is in Rome. And originally the film was actually called LSD $5 Paradise, because the title is a funny one, because it claims to be based on a book called LSD Paradise for $5 by the author Erskine Williams. But I've not been able to find any evidence that there is somebody called Erskine Williams. I've not found any. The only credit or the only reference to Erskine Williams in the world seems to be connected to the movie. But so originally it was called LSD, The Paradise at $5, which is why I think our film last time was called LSD, Hell for $5. I'm pretty sure that was maybe unless that film came out first and then they liked that title and called this one LSD Paradise. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm sure they're connected. But
yeah, don't be afraid of the possibility that that name change was a very last minute thing. So.
Yeah, but in the end, obviously, it was called Acid Delirium of the Senses anyway. So it says in here, so it's got a bit of a summary which I thought was helpful of what they're planning to do, and it says the story is built around a TV crime investigation. I mean, that wasn't particularly clear, but okay. Leading telesleuths into the urban world of America's Dolce Vita and today's rebel youth looking for kicks in the hallucinogenic netherworld of the new drug. So that's when they start talking about what they were shooting in Italy. Scenes in a San Francisco nightclub. Waitresses are topless. Poetry readings, guitar accompaniment. So it sounds like a lot of that sort of stuff was actually just shot in an Italian studio. But they were facing some issues with the movie, which I'll get to towards the end. But according to the director, who spent months in the US in 1966 researching the project, the film will accurately reflect the dramatic transition of American youth from the relatively mild pot generation to the trip cult and its expanding fascination for young people searching for new vision and new kicks. So there you go. That was the intention anyway. I mean, do you think they achieved that? Is it accurate?
It really kind of depends on how you want to look at it. This is, this is cut from the same cloth as pretty much every Italian exploitation film made in that period. Mm-hmm. It's using it's using the tried and true method of taking something that's current and using that as a hook to get people to see the film, and then kind of ladling on just everything that they can think of to try to connect it to whatever the hook is. And so the worm being attached to the hook here is LSD, but they also stick on the worm of sexy young women doing almost nudity, because they, for some reason in this film, feel that they can't, cross that line. We don't have any actual nudity. We're just definitely doing a lot of long, lingering looks at lovely ladies occasionally.
Yes.
And then strangely enough, they want to spend way too much time for a film about acid on an interracial relationship. It's when that came along, I was just like, well, this seems like an odd choice for a film about a drug, but okay. I guess we'll go along with it. But then again, at the same time, this is a movie that seems to have a very misogynistic attitude as well, because I mean, the film sports one character who is without a doubt evil, in my opinion. She does more to discombobulate human beings and try to convince them to commit suicide than any villain in any superhero film along the lines that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And she's kind of posited as far as the film itself as kind of a central character. It's a strange combination. I mean, like I said, the film starts off with a lot of what appears to be footage shot on location in New York City, around Greenwich Village, I think, of a bunch of happy-go-lucky hippie people, mostly barefoot, and I'm I have to admit that I'm kind of fascinated by films where they just seem to go out of their way to show extraordinarily dirty feet. It's very strange.
Oh,
I don't understand
yeah.
what's going on there.
No, and
But
there's a lot of acoustic guitar action as well.
a lot of a lot of kind of indiscriminate flailing about that is supposed to be dancing as well. It seems some of it, especially later on in the film, is supposed to be influenced by whatever hallucinatory medication they're ingesting at the time. But then there's also just some stuff where I guess it's possibly religious fervor, because we start off with, chants of Hare Krishna, and so it becomes difficult to know if you were just coming into this with no real idea of what you were watching. The first few minutes, you could go one way or the other about what you think this movie's going to be about. Are we talking about the Hare Krishna sect, or are we talking about something different?
It's basically like they're trying to just throw the entire Sgt. Pepper album at the audience.
That's not a bad way of looking at it. Yeah. Yes. Oh, wow, that's absolutely perfect. Okay. Yes. It's here's the thing. I never found the film boring, but at the same time, I also think that a lot of the reason why I wasn't finding it boring was that I had no idea which way this thing was going to jump next. Let's put it this way. If I were to list off just things that you're going to see in this film, slowly, eventually, the individual that I was explaining this to would have that open mouth stare of someone who's disbelieving me, right?
Yeah.
So if I were to tell you that you were going to see documentary footage from roughly 1967 on the streets of New York City, okay. If I were going to tell you that a lot of time was going to be spent on an interracial romance triangle, you'd say, okay. If I was then to tell you that the film that you were watching was going to take a strange turn into focusing on Mafioso, the obviously non-existent mafia move into the trucking of LSD. By the way, folks, nobody had to move LSD from one country to another. You just make the stuff yourself.
Yeah.
It's not something that would have had. It does, anyway. Trafficking of it would be one thing, nevertheless. So there are lots of time taken up with Mafioso in the film. And then at one point, you're actually going to see a visualization of Mafia executing a person using the old cement shoes routine.
Yeah.
If I were to tell you that all of these things were in the same film, you would be slightly confused as to how they would fit together. And don't worry, so were the filmmakers.
Yeah. And also we get to spend a lot of time with some kind of CEO who has parties where women jump over candles.
Yes, it's a party game.
Yeah.
It's like a strange version of the limbo thing.
Yeah, it's very funny.
It's very, very strange, and we spend way too much time on that.
Yeah, I've got quite a good breakdown of the film, actually, so we can kind of go through the different vignettes in a bit more detail. I just thought it was worth mentioning before we start the director, who I must confess, I looked through his film, so Giuseppe Scotese. Again, a bit like last week, I'm not familiar with anything by any of the names of anybody in this film.
And I think it's very telling that a number of the actors in this film, this is the only thing they ever did. Or, in some cases, they were much better known later on for being like a production manager. So
but Scotese did do some other kind of documentary type films, and was a writer and often wrote and directed. He did a film which I feel like I should be aware of, called Cannibal Domani, or Cannibals Tomorrow? Domani?
I am unsure.
Is that? I should. I'll tell you what.
You're the one with a smattering of Italian.
Learning Italian, and then whenever I press record on here, I lose it completely. Yeah, Cannibals Tomorrow, Cannibal Domani, which appears to be something to tie in with the early 80s cannibal boom, but no idea what that is. He did some things in the early... Well, he was working as a director right from the 40s, because by the time he made this film, he's in his late 50s, so, you know, just the right age to be making a youth film.
Yes.
But yeah, not familiar with anything that he made apart from perhaps his best known film is from 1974, Miracles Still Happen, which is the film based on the true story of Julian Kopke, something like that, who was the German Peruvian 17-year-old who was the only survivor of a plane crash in 1971. She was strapped to her seat, crashed in the Peruvian rainforest, and survived for 11 days before being found by lumberjacks. It's a really incredible story. I've read about that before for some reason. I've come across her story before. And she was the daughter of zoologists, and she was flying home the day after high school graduation with her mother. And then the plane was struck by lightning and basically disintegrated in the air.
Wow.
And she fell 3,000 meters into the rainforest. Just amazing. And then survived by following a river, and eventually some lumberjacks found her after nearly 2 weeks. Yeah, so anyway, pretty amazing.
1974 film called Miracles Still Happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So wow, okay.
I know, it's an amazing story, and the film does sound really interesting. I think maybe I've heard about her because Werner Herzog made a documentary about her in the 80s, and apparently it was really interesting. Herzog was interested in making that film about her because he was scheduled to be on the same plane whilst he was scouting locations for Aguirre, Wrath of God.
Oh, wow.
But at the last minute, he changed plans and didn't get on the plane. And so then, yeah, she was the only survivor. So he made a documentary about her in the 80s. There are some books. She wrote her own book about it. But yeah, so he made this film in the 70s. And it does sound really interesting. I'd like to see it because he gets a lot of the same people who were in the real story to be in the movie. Like even down to the lumberjacks who found her in real life. They play themselves in the movie. So it sort of sounds really interesting, but obviously she's played by Susan Penhaligon, a British actress.
So was the Herzog film a documentary or a film?
That's the documentary called Wings of Hope.
Wings of Hope, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, really amazing. So yeah, anyway, so that's probably his most well-known feature, I would imagine. And she's just sounds like a really interesting person. She's still around. She's only about 60 now, I think. 70, sorry, can't do maths. And she is a bat specialist, so I love bats, so I think she sounds awesome. Anyway, so there you go. I mean, are you familiar with that film or her story?
No.
Have you come across that?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, the only film that I might be familiar with through the mists of time that this director was ever involved with is a film called Pirates of Capri from 1949. He was apparently listed as a co-director. Not sure. There's something familiar about it, but then again, those types of films have a tendency to both make me smile and to blend together as memory recedes. So
I'm pretty sure you've seen just a couple of pirate films.
A couple. I've seen at least more than 5. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah, he did another pirate film in the 50s called Il Corsaro della Mezzaluna.
Mm-hmm. And that's one that I'm not sure about either, but it's obviously something that I would seek out. He appears to have done as any director in Italy, he appears to have at least done one spaghetti western, if not 2. So
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, so in terms of other names in this movie, he seems to have just found actors, some of them on location in New York. He's got a couple of people in here. Bud Thompson, who plays a character called Sal Martin. He is played by a former American, like a New York PE teacher, I believe. And and Janet Tiller, who plays a character called Paula, who's in there. She was British, but this is her single credit, her one only credit.
Yep.
Can't find anything about her. But yeah, they're mostly sort of quite unknown people who are in the film. There's quite a few, like you said, where it's their only credit.
Well, there's actually two actors that stand out as having had lengthy careers. There's Stephen Forsythe, obviously, who plays the young, handsome, up-and-coming CEO fellow. I know him, of course, from Bava's Hatchet for the Honeymoon.
Yes.
And quite a few other films, to be honest. So that was a familiar face that was automatically recognizable. And then there's John Bartha, who is an actor who was in half a dozen films that I've seen over the years. And you probably as well. I mean, he's it's hard to know. Well, knowing our audience, it's hard to know kind of what film you might best know him from. I mean, he was in Mission Stardust as a general.
Yes.
He played a sheriff.
Which you and I covered that a couple of years ago on the Bloody Pit.
He played in like in this film. He plays a mafioso in Cannibal Ferox. He was in he's Mr. Hamilton in Eyeball, which is where most people that are paying attention to our voices right now might have seen him. But he was in a lot of films like The Sicilian Connection, and he's uncredited in a few films that everybody's seen. But he was a sheriff again in Return of Sabata. And like I say, that's the kind of thing you're looking at here. This is a guy whose face turns up pretty regularly in not just spaghetti westerns, but a lot of different kinds of Italian films across the stretch of his career.
Yeah, he seemed to get on well with Lucio Fulci's in a few Fulci films.
Exactly.
I'm sure you would know him very well for his role as a Mountie in White Fang. I know how much you like a Mountie.
What wasn't going to bring that up, but now that you have, yes, this is true.
Yeah.
Hey, he's in a couple of the Margheriti science fiction films. He's in More Between the Planets and More of the Planets. So he, if you're as confused as we are by those titles, sitting right there together next to each other, then believe me, he thought he was probably only shooting one movie. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's obviously just a guy who worked around the studios and just comes in for half an hour and says a couple of lines and then he's off again. He's a lot of uncredited roles as well. But yeah, it's funny that he turns up in this one, like you said, as the sort of mafia guy. So it's quite an odd collection of people doing things in this film. And there's also, I don't know how to describe it, there's also a couple of people playing themselves. One of the most significant is there's a couple of interviews, like you mentioned, when it's still pretending to be a documentary. They interview some doctors and experts. They interview a guy from a hospital who has patients who are suffering from like LSD, bad trips. But they have a brief interview, and it's hard to know if they actually shot this themselves or if it's newsreel footage or something. But they talked to a guy called Humphrey Osmond,
right,
who was a British psychiatrist who ended up working in America. He is the man who invented the word psychedelic. So he's quite key to this whole thing. And I was looking him up a little bit, and he kind of was exploring the use of LSD as a tool for treating patients in mental institutions. So he worked a lot in different sort of psychiatric hospitals and things, and started to experiment with LSD and how it would work for people who were schizophrenic and stuff like that. So, and then he was the guy who gave LSD to Aldous Huxley, who wrote The Doors of Perception based on that. So they had a long correspondence with each other, and so he was sort of all the way through the psychedelic experience with this guy, Humphrey Osmond. So so he pops up in an interview there. But quite a fascinating character, worth looking up if anyone wants to explore this a bit more.
Yeah.
So he's kind of there to add to the documentary feel for the whole thing. But like you said, it kind of tips into this weird collection of random stories and organised crime. So I was looking around again, because this is not a film that's available very easily, and the print that we found is not great.
No.
And I couldn't find any reviews, but I did find a German blog, which I had to translate into English. But that was as good as I could find. So in this blog, this is from the italocinema.de blog. A writer, Richie Pastilli, I think is the writer on this one. He calls it an extremely entertaining pseudo-documentary, and then goes through all the different steps, which I thought was helpful. So we have some different stories, and if you see what you remember, we have a model, Shelley, who's a very successful fashion model in New York, and she is given a birthday cake that's been laced with LSD. And
yes. We get to see her, trying on lots of different outfits in front of a photographer. Yeah. So, there's that. We're trying to tie that all in. That's a standard 60s thing. Mm-hmm. So then she goes for a walk in New York and takes off most of her clothes and gets into a fountain. Mm-hmm. And it looks like I like all this New York stuff, because it looks to me like they're filming in Manhattan without any permission. Oh, definitely. Because this stuff happens really quickly. So she gets into the fountain, then the police pull up really fast and whisk her away. And I assumed that those are probably actors, but they haven't got permission. So they really are doing this as quickly as they can. Yeah, that smells like guerrilla filmmaking. It's just like, those cops were there within 10 seconds of her going into the fountain. This is all staged, Yeah, but I guess for people who are interested in seeing real on-the-street footage of New York in the late 60s, this film is great for that. Oh, it's amazing. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things to kind of recommend it as something that should be kind of held onto or possibly restored, because I know that there is plenty of, once cameras were able to be rented cheaply enough for almost anybody to make movies, independent productions and things of that nature, these kinds of on-the-street real, guerrilla filmmaking looks at different cities are available, and that's one of the reasons why this film kept kind of catching my attention and keeping me with it, is that stuff when you're looking at obviously like 1967 street views of New York City. Absolutely fascinating. I get caught up in just looking at the signage, the way things were laid out, just the mix of people that would be going by. That's honestly something that is worth looking at in this movie. Yeah, it is really cool. So, as he says here, as the film progresses, the young model continues to indulge in LSD. I guess the birthday cake is her first time, but it leads to a kind of change in her behavior. Yes, because this simple-minded film wants us to believe that somehow LSD, much like an opiate, is addictive. Yeah, because it leads to her becoming increasingly paranoid, and ultimately, she has a fatal accident. I think she gets hit by a car. Oh, that's yes. You've told everyone the end of the film. I can't believe this. Yes, sorry. You've ruined it, Adrian. What were you thinking? So then we have the young reporter
Paola. This is played by Janet Tiller, English actress with only one credit. She's in a relationship with a young, successful company director, Eddie Stone. So she recommends, like, they're a bit like unhappy in this relationship, so she persuades him to take LSD. And like it says here, instead of a lustful blossoming of the male libido, the psychedelic trip triggers repressed mother complexes in the now completely apathetic Eddie and ultimately develops into an absolute horror trip for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so from this point on, the previously successful businessman experiences an ever-increasing social decline. So their relationship falls apart, he drops out of society, and we kind of bump into him later in the film, basically living like a hippie.
Because that's what LSD will do to you folks.
Yeah. Then there is the black dancer and heartthrob Nikki, who has an open relationship. Well, it's open for him.
It's open for him, yeah.
With his constantly travelling partner Patrizia, Patrizia, she works in like local theatre, I think.
Seems that
Something
way,
like
yeah.
that.
Because we definitely get to see some off-Broadway something.
Oh man, those scenes are hilariously 60s.
Yeah, and at the time, clearly they weren't meant to be, but man, 10 seconds later they were.
Yeah. So he's in this relationship with her, but then, like you said, he's also having an affair with...
Or trying to have an affair.
Yeah, with this other woman. And it doesn't say her name here. I can't remember her name.
Oh, it's the blonde.
The blonde woman, yeah. She is horrible. And
she's she's the evil character in this film.
So eventually, the three of them are in the house together because they take LSD together. Nikki
and that character's name is Ursula.
Ursula, that's
the
it.
evil blonde is Ursula.
Yeah. So they take LSD together, and then they encourage his girlfriend to take LSD as well. Which ultimately leads to Patrizia jumping off a bridge. I'm not sure which bridge. It's one of the bridges out of Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And they just stand there, and Nikki especially just stands there and watches her jump. Doesn't attempt at any point to stop her jumping off.
It's very strange. I mean, not that we need to overemphasize that. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah. But I think it's kind of compulsory in every film about LSD for somebody to jump from a great height.
But it wasn't really the standard to have a gorgeous blonde woman trying to convince someone to do this to themselves by saying, all children of God have wings. It's like, what? Yeah, lady, just go ahead and show us the horns underneath the hair.
Yeah, because then when she jumps off and Nikki is horrified, but then Ursula just kind of goes and gets in a taxi, and then turns out to be a horrible racist.
Oh, I know. Or at least says something insanely racist to get him to back off. Yeah.
And then the police come and arrest him.
As a black man in New York City at any point in the last ever, probably possible. Yeah.
But again, it's all on location. They're really just shooting on that bridge and with real traffic in the background, which is quite cool. So we've got those stories, and there's also, he doesn't mention it here, but we've mentioned it already, that one of the characters gets involved with organized crime, because as you said, that's where you get your LSD from.
Yeah.
And ultimately sort of betrays the mob, gets tracked down and thrown into the Hudson.
With cement shoes.
With, their concrete boots.
What did you think of the the delivery method that the mobsters work up for LSD? They impregnate the pages of an Ian Fleming James Bond novel with the LSD.
I love that. And there's a bit quite near the beginning. One of the characters has got a copy of From Russia with Love, and there's a little dot on each the corner of each page.
So that and then I love the fact that this just sings the body 1960s. This is so clearly them trying to wedge every like visual signifier they can into this sucker. They tear up the pages of the Bond novel so that people can take the LSD, and they're serving them to each other off of the cover of Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited album cover. It's just one of those perfect little moments. It's like, 1967. There's everything we need to know. Bond mania, Bob Dylan, acid. It's a trifecta.
And what I like is, so we saw this in the last film, where when people take a trip, their vision goes a bit blurry and everyone has animal heads. And in this film, they just stick a kaleidoscope lens in front of the lens, and
or just kind of like double exposures sometimes.
There's like double and triple imagery on the screen, which it's just basically trick lenses, which is quite fun. But then there are also some great party sequences as well. There's a lot of music, and there's even a band that I couldn't identify. Which does make me wonder why they didn't actually get Andy Warhol's factory in this film, but there's definitely a sequence that looks like they were trying to recreate the factory to a degree.
A little bit, yeah.
With the sort of Velvet Underground light parties and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty cool. As you just to finish off this article here, he calls it a contemporary historical curiosity in the form of an acid-soaked pseudo-drug explanation. And I think that's, it's about right. I mean, they are trying to, and because the drug had just been made illegal, and it was always illegal as far as we know in Italy, so they have to ultimately show that LSD is dangerous and to be avoided. So it is basically like that film Reefer Madness, isn't it, where they get to show all the fun and then they have to warn the audience that this is a terrible thing. Right.
That's exactly this type the type of film that this is. It is an exploitation film built on some contemporary thing that allows the filmmakers to indulge in putting anything and everything into their film that they think will entice people to come and see the movie. It's simplistic. It's silly. It has lots of ridiculous dialogue masquerading as insightful explanations of the soul. All of them, from these young minds being horribly affected by LSD and other obvious medications that they shouldn't be taking at all. It is, and this is kind of why I have stayed away over the course of my film-loving life from these types of films, because this is exactly the kind of film that I didn't want to see. Okay, and I'm going somewhere with this, so let me finish this perturbed thought. This is the type of mess, cinematic, just random ideas, scenes that don't have anything to do with each other, various elements that are just kind of hodgepodge together with masking tape and forward momentum, that I assumed that films wrapped around the concept of exploiting LSD and the usage of it would be like. And so I've stayed away from them because, as I just described, I've no interest in that kind of thing. It's like, you're just going to waste my time for 80 to 90 minutes and then we're going to call it a day. But, Adrian, I have to thank you, because whether it's the age I've reached or your insistence that we look at these things, I'm glad I've seen these things. I'm glad I've seen this one specifically now because it is exactly what I thought I wanted to avoid. And I found myself for, roughly 85 minutes or so, just kind of being amused at the train wreck that it is and being entertained by the fact that it is an absolute, total, and complete mess. I enjoyed watching this. It's not good. It's not anything other than an extraordinary curiosity, as the German writer a second ago mentioned. It is fascinating, though, on levels that I don't go looking for when I seek out a movie. The types of things that I find to be fascinating and interesting in this movie are not the things that I go hunting for generally. And so it's strange. I don't want to call it a palate cleanser. That's not really what it is. But it was an unexpected joy to see this mess of a film and realize that it was exactly what I expected it to be when I didn't want to see it years ago. This type of film at all. But it was also something that entertained me, possibly because it was exactly what I expected it to be.
Yeah.
But it's put together in such a bald-faced, idiotic way that I kind of enjoyed the crap out of it.
Oh, good. Well, I'll take that. That's good.
Yeah, it's definitely on the positive side.
That's what's fun about this stuff. It's so like left field, and this is not the kind of film I would usually seek out. But there's a lot about it that's really interesting. When the film was submitted to the censorship board in Italy in January of 1968, it was banned initially. So they held votes, and the censors voted to ban it. But the vote to ban it was only won by one vote, so it was quite narrow. So the filmmakers took it to appeal. The producer, Alberto Canetti, took it to appeal, and the decision was reversed, allowing the film to be released. And apparently this is because two members of the board from the Italian government who had originally voted to ban it were absent for the resit because they were visiting with the Premier of Yugoslavia, or they were doing something for his official visit, so they couldn't be there for the vote. So therefore, their votes weren't counted, and the film got passed. So we have the Premier of Yugoslavia to thank for the film getting released in Italy. Although one of the issues with the film was it's one of the reasons they wanted to ban it, according to this article, was for its exposition of psychedelic practices. And this is an interesting phrase. It's exasperating eroticism. They found the eroticism to be exasperating.
That's
interesting.
interesting.
So all that was changed for the release to go through was some dialogue modification. And I think this must have been either in the interview with Humphrey Osmond or one of the other experts, where they claimed that LSD can be helpful and decisive in sexual disturbances.
Yeah, that's early on in the film. That's
There's sort of suggestion that it could be helpful in certain therapies. So they had to make a bit of a modification there because they didn't want LSD to be seen to be helpful at all. But they did. So the director and producer, they got Italy's most prominent sociologists to be involved in a series of private screenings and debates. And they tried to really push the point with the appeals board that the film illustrates the dangers of LSD and criminal activity of acid pushers, while also condemning the use of psychedelics as a social aberration. So it's that whole like Child Bride, Reefer Madness kind of roadshow thing where they'll show all the stuff, but make sure that everyone knows that this is completely terrible, and that's how they can get away with showing it all the time. So, nothing's really changed, I guess.
No, it hasn't.
But anyway, they got away with it. So their second appeal, for the second vote, was passed, and the film was released. But I've not been able to find any evidence that it was ever released in the States, which I imagine they would have wanted to, at least get it on 42nd Street or something.
Maybe.
But there you go. So the film is no longer commercially available. There is a kind of bootleg DVD of it out there, and there's a very ropey print if you know where to look. It thankfully does have, you can get good subtitles, so you can actually follow what's going on. Which helps.
Yes, you can. The subtitles do allow you to know what is being said on screen. Yes.
So it did get a bit of a European release. And the reason that this German blog picks up on it is because it was released in Germany in the summer of 1968. So maybe it had some distribution around Europe, but very hard to find much in the way of evidence. So who knows how influential or not this was, whether anybody watched this movie and immediately threw their copies of From Russia with Love away and swore off taking LSD again. Who knows?
Or became convinced that mobsters were importing LSD from offshore and drowning people in bodies of water with some issues. Yeah.
At least this film doesn't try and say that it's extracted from mushrooms, like the last one.
I forgot about that. Oh my Lord! I like I say, the documentary stuff, the stuff where they're clearly filming guerrilla style in New York City. Some of that footage may have been purchased from somewhere else, but a lot of it looks like they shot it themselves, because I don't know that this is necessarily the kind of footage that would have been something that some other documentary filmmaker would have been using. I think that the film, like I say, for the first few minutes, it'll fool you into thinking that you're getting into some kind of clinical documentary of a type about LSD. They fool you for the first few minutes, but then when it makes that turn, it's not long before you go, I'm just watching an Italian exploitation film. So if that's what you're looking for, you're gold.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we love. So our final film in this mini-season that we've got to look forward to next time is called La Rivoluzione Sessuale, or The Sexual Revolution, from 1968, written by a young up-and-coming writer, Dario Argento.
I've heard of him.
So he didn't direct it, but he did write it. And I haven't seen this film before. I've watched bits of it. There's a really good trip sequence to look forward to. I'll tease that. But that one's a drama about a kind of social experiment involving sex and drugs. So there you go. Something to look forward to. Something for all the family.
You've definitely intrigued me. Yes.
Yeah. So that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. Let us know if you have any favourite LSD or acid themed films, or if you've been on any particularly interesting trips yourself. I'm sure we wouldn't mind hearing about that.
Sure, why
not? Please do get in touch with us by email or Twitter or Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. And of course, leave us a review wherever you listen. Share the links to the podcast with all your friends.
Oh, and let people know that they can buy Wild Wild Podcast t-shirts, by the way.
Oh yeah, do you have yours yet?
Yes, I have. It arrived. I meant to say something to you already about it, but yes, very much happiness with the Wild Wild Podcast t-shirt. It is a lovely thing.
Oh, good. I haven't got one myself yet, so you're the first customer.
Hopefully not the last, people.
No.
Go and check that out. Tell them where they can find that stuff.
Yeah, so we have a store. I'd forgotten about that. Thank you. Yes, we do have a merch store on Zazzle, which is the only platform I could get to work, basically, because I tried some of the others and then they just kept kicking me off for unknown reasons. Yeah, so do check it out. The link is also in the show notes, and I've got a couple of designs on there so far. But mainly, if you would like our logo on a t-shirt, that is the place to go. Or, buy one for family and friends for Christmas.
Exactly. Confound them with a T-shirt from a podcast they probably don't know anything about.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing some photos of you modeling the T-shirt, Rod. At some point, we could.
Oh yeah, well, you know what? I will do that before we next convene to record. I shall do so.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. I'd forgotten about that. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll leave it there. Any last words, Rod, before we finish?
Stay away from hard drugs, folks, because if you drop them, they hurt your foot.
Thank you. I've got a lot of old copies of James Bond novels, so I'm going to go and flick through a few of them and just see.
Gonna lick a few pages to see if anything good happens.
Just going to go and suck a few corners. I couldn't rip the corners off the book. What, drugs or no drugs? Oh, that would
yes. The destruction of a book for any type of purpose of this any purpose at all just terrifies me.
Yeah, I'm not that sick and twisted, but I definitely suck a few pages. You never know. Okay. On that note,
you've put two suck on a corner and suck a few pages. Now there's phrases that will never leave my head.
Yeah. Oh, we should put that on the T-shirt, maybe.
listen to Wild Wild podcast while you're sucking on a page.
Yes. Okay, everybody. Stay groovy out there. And bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Oh dear. Right. The end.
I don't think that the psychedelic drugs are drugs at all in the sense they don't cure any physical illness. They're not drugs like heroin, and they're not drugs even like alcohol. They're instruments which expand consciousness. They speed up the mind. Chemicals are the keys which open up and speed up, expand the mind.